the whole bellwether model and system is completely collapsed because the mainstream media has said Joe Biden has won the election without finished counting, and his transition team is being put in place now. This is without the authentication of the Federal Election Commission. Now, world leaders around the world are now recognize him as the president-elect of the United States. World leaders right now, London, you name them, they're all saying he's the president. He is technically going to be the president, and he is the president to be. I mean, this is how insane it is. And it all has to do with this mail-in balloting. And right now, just before the presentation, we're seeing the casting of votes in multiple states, starting with what I've been warning, as we said, the mail-in ballot harvesting. They're harvesting these ballots. And here's the thing that many people don't realize. There is no way to verify the results of the election as accurate because no matter how many times you recount the votes, you will not be able to ascertain which ones are legal and which ones are illegal. And here's the reason why. When you vote in person, you first make an active choice to vote, confirm your identity as a registered voter to a poll worker, then you mark out your ballot privately in the presence of other people, and finally hand it off to a poll worker who then scans it directly into a vote counting machine where you watch. So in other words, you've established your legal right to vote and have secured the chain of custody of your ballot until it is scanned, and you participated in that whole process. None of those steps are present in the mail balloting. As soon as you open a mail ballot, a mailed-in mail ballot, as soon as you open it up, you cannot discern where it came from, who it came from, when it came, how it came from. You cannot. That is the problem with this mail-in balloting system that was put in place for COVID. And because of COVID, they allowed the mail-in ballot counting to continue until December. That's right. Instead of like, oh, okay, you got to count it all on that day of the election or by the closing of the poll. No, till December. So these votes will keep going up theoretically for Biden more and more and more and more, even though they cannot be verified. And right now, Ohio Attorney General has joined a bid to ask the U.S. Supreme Court to toss the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's late October ruling. And two Georgia GOP senators called on the Republican Secretary of State to resign over failure to deliver an honest and transparent election. Emphasis on transparent. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed to hear the GOP challenge over dozens of election observers who claimed they were corralled and unable to view the count, which may invalidate up to 800,000 ballots for Biden. Maybe some of them for Trump, but a majority of them for Biden. And Nevada poll workers attest outright fraud and have now gone to the Federal Elections Commission. This just happened just shortly before I started. I wanted to include that last minute. Here's another thing too. I don't want to go too geeky on you and get into this, but the signs of election fraud after analyzing mail-in ballot data. What you normally see is these are additional Biden votes added. So as you go up here, these are additional Biden votes added, and these are the ones additional Trump voters added. So as you go further out, this is Trump voters. As you go up, Biden voters. Notice here, okay, so let me explain these two graphs. It's very important, okay? I'm not going to get too deep into it, and I don't want to bore you, right, because we still have a lot to cover here. But what this graph really illustrates, both of these, is that there was election fraud going on. The data comparing several states, swing states and non-swing states, using these data graphs clearly illustrate what fraud looks like and what fraud does not look like. And based on this Edison data source that's just been revealed, what we're looking at is a time series analysis here, two different slides, of logs of the ballot counting process for every state in the entire country. And through this scientific approach, statistical scientific approach, you can spot fraud. And the data on the left graph shows that the points in the straight line are mail-in votes. So the closer these dots are on a straight line, as we go further into election counting, they represent the mail-in votes. And you can see across this, in respect to the mail-in votes, the ratio of those votes going to Biden or going to Trump, all right? And since the ballots are randomly mixed together during the transport and spanning areas occupied by multiple voting demographics, we can expect the ratio of the mail-in of Biden ballots to Trump ballots will remain relatively constant over time and across the different reporting updates. One of the first things you notice while exploring this data set is that there seems to be an obvious pattern in the ratio of new Biden ballots as we go deeper. Look at this, as we go further out in ratio to the Trump ballots. So that's one thing. But now, if you look at the graph on the right here, and this is for Wisconsin, look at the graph on the right here, it shows that Wisconsin counting history log, right? You see early in the election day, it's spotted all over the place. This is normal. This is a normal distribution of counting. It measures the ratio of Biden to Trump ballots versus time. And what we see here is that the initial ballot reporting is very noisy or random in the beginning. Then when they close it, note here, 11-3, 11-3, right? Note here, around this time here, we see a steady stream of votes coming in. So what we see is that the initial ballot reporting that was initially very noisy become very singular or streamlined. And we see on the y-axis, we have a ratio of Democrat ballots to Republican ballots in reporting batches. And on the x-axis, we have reporting time. So at 4 a.m., so based on 4 a.m., around this time here, 4 a.m., what we see, there's a marked shift in the ratio between Democrat and Republican mail-in ballots. And based on this, what we're seeing that this should not happen. It should look like this all across, by the way. It should look like this all the way into the first day or two of the election, when they're doing the election counting, I should say. So what we're seeing is an anomaly. So that means around 3 a.m., what this is stating in detail, around 3 a.m. Wisconsin time, a fresh batch of 169,000 new absentee ballots, mail-in ballots arrived. And by 4 a.m., the D to R ratio was thrown out of whack. That's because these ballots were not sampled from the real Wisconsin voter population, which was here. Notice this is here. This is prior to that 3 a.m. prior. It's because these ballots were not randomized. They were injected. They were sorted and injected into the system. And they inherently have a different D and R signature than the rest of the ballots because these additional ballots were added to the batch either through backdating, you're going to hear that word a lot, or ballot manufacturing, or more importantly, software tampering or glitchy software. So this is the kind of analogous, this type of statistical analysis based on the data sets that was published by the New York Times that had direct access to this information. We don't have access to this, where we can see a carbon-14 print or dating for this ballot batch. So what does the authenticity show? Is this authentic? If this is authentic, then it shows that we have voter fraud. We have the same situation. Look what's happening in Pennsylvania, even more extreme. Instead of random, it's all over. So again, this should not happen. It should not happen. And it's observed almost nowhere else in the country because of all the ballots that are randomly shuffled in the mail system. They all should be homogeneous during the counting process. In other words, this should be spread out through the entire process. Okay, so here's another thing, swing state voting irregularities.
If you'd like to watch the full presentation and more like this on geopolitics, the economy, and world events from an archetypal and mundane astrological perspective, join the Global Transformation Astrology membership. Go to gta.williamstickevers.com or click the link in the description for twice-monthly webinars with Q&A, access to the growing library of previous webinars, and a collection of information and resources on today's most important topics, plus a monthly Ask Me Anything session for Gold members. We are now in the middle of a massive collective psycho-spiritual death-rebirth process. Stay informed and be a part of the breakthrough, not the breakdown. Become a GTA member today.